Good morning, everybody. My name's Mary Jane, and I work at the county office, and we're excited to provide you with an opportunity to hear about possibilities for middle school. Just a reminder, if you go to the county office website, you'll be able to see each of the sessions that have been provided so far. They've all been recorded. Any materials that were provided are also there aligned for your availability and for your use. And today is going to focus on the area of middle school. The experts that you'll be talking to, they'll never call themselves experts, but let's say the iterative curiosity-bound educators that you'll be talking to are Eileen Smith, who's a director here at the county office, Brett Geithman, who's the superintendent of the Larkspur District. If you have any questions as you're listening, please go ahead and put them into the chat. This is being recorded and will be available for you by tomorrow. And then not to forget, this Thursday, high school will be the focus. So with that, I'm gonna pass the mic over to Eileen Smith.
Okay, thank you, Mary Jane. Welcome, everybody. We're really excited today because we're going to focus a lot on the process versus just the end product. And so to get us all started, we really wanted to focus on what this mission is about and that everything is possible because, as Mary Jane said, we're all innovators and we've got growth mindset. So here we go.
The first step is to create a phenomenal, diverse team of stakeholders that include teachers, classified staff, students, parents, community liaisons, community partners, after-school program directors, and administrators to design a program to meet the unique needs of each student and family. We have the opportunity to develop an educational system that is rooted in core beliefs for equity and access for all and extends beyond our traditional classroom walls. Our task will be to design programs that accelerate learning in order to make up for the learning losses from the spring. The mission will include gaining multiple perspectives through stakeholder meetings and working within the current state and county public health guidelines.
Okay, my friends, so now we're set. Everybody's ready to attack the mission and we're on our way. So when we do this, the first thing that we really need to be concerned about is developing programs to help our students feel connected and supported. And with everything that's going on right now, that is going to be probably the most crucial thing that we do is to help our students feel connected to each other, to the teachers, to ourselves. What we do know is that now is the time to rethink and redirect the way education looks and feels like for our students. We're not going back to the way things used to be done. However, this is exciting news. Teachers, students, families, they've proven they can be really, really flexible and they can learn new ways. They want to learn. We also must adhere to the current state and county public health guidelines for our student groups. What we don't know, we don't know that we don't know. So we're just constantly learning from each other. And this is why Brett's going to spend so much time on how he's gaining multiple perspectives from everybody. So what can we do right now? We're going to engage, as Mary Jane said, in this iterative process. And as we do that, we're going to constantly be communicating our plans. But the very first thing that we're going to do is assemble a team. And Brett, can you take it from here, my friend?
Absolutely. And so, You know, these are challenging times, but we can also kind of reframe our thinking and look at them as exciting opportunities. And that's what we've really taken hold here in LCM, and when we encourage all districts to do the same. Looking at the models for next year, or how could we service students? How can we continue providing high levels of education and engagement with kids? We really I needed to identify the various perspectives that we need to take into consideration and get feedback from. And so what we thought a lot about was the different groups, right? Our classified group, our teachers, our students, and so different ways that we could do that as well. And I'll go a little bit more in depth as to what our process was to do this, but the overarching goal is to focus on that process. And so, so a lot of different variations. So to get us to the ultimate presentation to the board, which still is in draft form after that presentation, we first started creating our hybrid models for school with 2 different models, and looking at elementary, looking at middle school, having different ideas, and running through a couple different drafts through our administrative leadership team. Our admin team meets twice a week, and this we did a lot of heavy lifting on prior to taking it to teachers for feedback and taking it to our distance learning leadership team. And since day one that we went on this this journey, right, in the distance learning format, we've held classified meetings on a weekly basis. Every Tuesday, we meet with all classified staff. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from these opportunities that we've had with distance learning. I think having these classified meetings are something that will continue when we go back to regular instruction. But what they've done is they've provided opportunities for us to work through different scenarios and different situations by gathering this feedback through stakeholders. So again, we created drafts as an admin lead team. We presented these drafts to every school site to gather feedback. We then also presented them with our distance learning leadership team, which is representative of K through 8 specialists, classroom teachers, different departments at our middle school. We then presented it at our classified staff meeting to gather feedback from their perspective. And one thing, if you're a part of these meetings, you've probably heard us say is, one, either poke holes in it. What are we missing? Let's look at this from a different lens. We really want to make sure that we're looking at every single aspect of these hybrid plans. We also wanted to give some parent surveys, but before the parent surveys, we decided to hold, in a sense, kind of parent focus groups. We scheduled 3 parent meetings that were open. We presented the plans, the contingency plans for next year. Parents could ask any question or comment. And then at the end of that kind of focus group meeting, we call them our coffee chats, but it kind of served like a focus group. I just flashed a QR code on the screen and they could give us some more feedback, just write it in the survey aspect to us. We also held DLAC meetings to make sure that we're looking at how are we best serving English learners and what services, not only in the classroom base, but also in distance learning, have our English learner families found most effective. Another element of this was also organizing a community partnership meeting. And this is really with our childcare partners throughout the LCM community. I noticed we were having a lot of one-on-one meetings and just decided, let's get everybody in the same kind of Zoom call. Let's talk about our distance learning plans. Let's talk about our contingency plans. And let's talk about our needs for this partnership. And the needs specifically with elementary were providing on-site childcare for the distance learning days. And if you attended the session last week, you'll know what that means. But what's relevant for our middle school and for actually all of our staff is the ability to provide childcare for our staff members. That is becoming more and more difficult. And so what our goal in LCM is to find community partners willing to have infant toddler programs on our school sites. And so we held that meeting last week. They also filled out a survey, and we're having additional meetings with those that are interested. We've also shared these models with the Board of Trustees. So now gathered all of this feedback, presented it, and it again is still in a draft form. We're going into uncharted water here. It's an exciting time. It's a time to really get creative with your teams, and presenting it at the board meeting allowed us again for more feedback. So these will continue to evolve. And so looking at this process, it really overall adds strength to that overall outcome and makes people excited and heard about where we're moving towards as a district.
Thank you, Brett. I think that's huge because Really, it is the process, and the outcome is going to represent what all the stakeholders say. So by doing this model, I think we all can really see that you're going to come up with something that works for everyone. So that's huge. Thank you so much for that. And then here is the criteria and restrictions, Brett, if you want to share those.
Absolutely. So a number of things that we're really taking a look at are, when building this model, we need to first identify what are our criteria and restrictions. So looking at equity in mind, and looking at how are we going to, basically, we've done a lot of work to detrack students. And now looking at cohorts, this might shift districts towards tracking students again. And so what are some options there? And so I know Eileen and Julie have talked about different options where, especially for Math 7, 8, to look at those students who are moving on to that more compacted class, to have that as an outside module. That would allow students to still have a heterogeneous math class, but still receive that advancement so they could take algebra in 8th grade. So that's a great variation to really take a look at that equity piece there. Of course, looking at our cohort size, as of right now, it's 12. Our hope is 15. Actually, a blessing would be 25 would be amazing. Using childcare program and placement. So if there are childcare issues or sibling issues, these are things that we're looking across the district on. And then of course, limiting that movement across campus. And so really not changing classes. How do we service lunch? How do we have recess? And so again, looking at these plans all coming together and gathering that feedback to ultimately create these scenarios for us. And so here's what we're thinking about for middle school, and it can go a couple different ways. Again, I really want to stress, these are draft plans. These are constantly evolving, but I think what the important thing is that we have a stakeholder group who's analyzing these, who's providing us feedback so that we can evolve together and have something ready for the fall. It also decreases the anxiety for our teachers, for our students, and for our community by having plans ready to say, we don't know what the fall is going to look like if we're hybrid distance learning, but here's our thinking around each one. And so what we're looking at is splitting the cohorts or classes sections into two halves, our cohort A, cohort B. You can see one cohort attends class in person on Monday, Tuesday, the other one's Thursday, Friday. Wednesday is the extensive classroom cleaning in between tracks or in between cohorts. As of right now, teachers can't go between multiple cohorts. And so we do have a solution for that. And so I'll kind of just jump down to the second bold there, is an option for, if the teachers can't move, is to push the mini lessons through the screen that's in every classroom. So while the kids wouldn't change and the adult wouldn't change, students are matched with a cohort and matched with an educator. And so the educator would, of course, facilitate their content area, but then other content areas would be pushed in for a 10 to 15 minute mini lesson. Students would engage in independent practice following that, and they would have access to their homeroom kind of educator within that classroom. So we're looking at either a 4 or 5 period day. Very similar in the sense of, if it's a 5 period day, you can see what subjects would be covered, and then we'd have an enrichment wheel that is predetermined by grade level. PE and the 7th period optional would be delivered virtually. Or we could go to a 4 period where we're looking at ELA, math, science, social studies, and then the electives in PE are delivered virtually as well. And so we've talked about how can we accomplish that with kids still on campus, and then how can we do that with even a modified day if we have latitude with instructional minutes.
Awesome. And then is there anything more you wanted to add to this one?
Yeah, I mean, and part of this too is so you know that there's going to be time when students will be in the classroom and times when students will be distance learning. And so our distance learning leadership team is looking at a variety of ways to accomplish the distance learning component without basically having 2 different models of classroom operating, basically doubling the work. We don't want to do that. And so one thing we looked at is those Wednesdays, having those as the opportunity where departments and pre-record those lessons, those mini lessons that would be pushed out. Or if a teacher is comfortable with this idea, and we'll explore this more, having Zoom on, having them basically go live during their mini lesson in the classroom so that students in the distance learning can also access that same content in real time and of course recording with the option to watch it later. During the classroom-based instruction, this is a really important time where students are receiving that individual personalized support as well as that small group support. And so, so those are things that we're definitely analyzing there or looking into there.
Perfect. And I think that small group support really goes back to the whole social emotional learning, and that students are going to really have to learn to depend on each other as they're watching these mini lessons. And the teacher, maybe it's a math teacher and is not as familiar with perhaps the social studies. So the students are really going to be, the norms are going to have to be that they help each other as well. And then Brett, this is something, and I know Julia from Ross Valley was interested in this as well. And this really kind of shows going like one step further so that perhaps even when the students get to go back to school, that we have these small learning communities. So really what it would look like is that each teacher has 2 cohorts. Cohort A would be the 12 students that get to come on campus, and then cohort B would be the 12 students that are learning virtually until we can have all 24 at school at the same time. So 4 teachers would also be connected. So we have the math, ELA, science, and social studies. This way, with the teachers planning together, students don't feel overwhelmed with the amount of homework or what's going on, because there's some synergy between the lessons. This is an opportunity to integrate the project-based learning that so many teachers are. And do not be overwhelmed with this visual. So focus first on the left-hand corner for mathematics. So there's 1 teacher, there's 4 homeroom teachers. And the students go just to the 1 classroom now. And as you can see, the teacher has his cohort of 12, plus also a cohort of 12 that are from home doing Zoom until that regulation changes. And what you can see is the second period, that teacher, the math teacher, is zooming to the science cohort, but the class stays the same. And then the students in math homeroom class, the science teacher, she's zooming to them. And then you can see the relationship over on the far right where you have the ELA and the social studies teacher, they're zooming. And then what happens is 4th period, that's where you have the diagonal. So the cohorts, they stay together, but they get from all of those teachers. So it's just kind of a visual, and Brett, it really even kind of matches what you were saying before. And the beauty of this is that the teachers, though, are also connected so that they're making sure that not one subject is overwhelming a student on any given day. And then this model, if and when the kids get to go back to school and move from classroom to classroom, that cohort would move from classroom to classroom again. And so this is where Brett's beautiful thinking about racial equity is so crucial, because if in fact we don't want unintended consequences if kids get placed into an advanced mathematics class, then they end up having to stay together all day. And so what we don't want to do inadvertently is putting all the brown students into 1 cohort group. We want the classes to be heterogeneous. So thank you. All right. So now we've talked about assembling a team, creating the instructional scenarios. And so now we want to go to talking about developing those dispositions in students that positively impact student learning. And one of them is feeling like I am capable. I have a sense of agency, identity, and ownership, which again speaks loudly for those heterogeneous class placements, because I don't want to think, oh, I'm in this cohort because I don't get to take advanced mathematics. So what we're talking about is acceleration versus remediation. Yes, there's going to be some lost learning, but if you look at remediation, which basically means bringing in all of last year and starting with last year versus this year, no, what we want to do is start with this year's standards and embed and spiral some of the things that students maybe need to hear because they didn't get an opportunity in the prior year. This is a beautiful resource. When you look at the resource slide later, there's scaffolding strategies for acceleration, which you should clearly send out to all of your teachers. And when you're developing those dispositions, really think about putting kids in charge of their own learning. Remember, there's going to be 12 of them there, connected all day long. Let them see the rubrics, the examples, teach them how to do that metacognitive process of reflection and constantly seeing where they are. And believe me, the students will begin helping each other with that. So we're going back to school. We're going to build the culture. We'll put in all of those norms and protocols for safety as well as for the social emotional learning piece. We will make sure that they're culturally responsive practices. We're going to constantly be assessing. This piece is huge, not just where students are socially, emotionally, and academically, but where are our teachers and our staff? We have to constantly be checking in with each other and then making sure we're providing tiered support for teachers and staff as well as for our students. And just in terms of timeline, so what Brett was talking about, he was really kind of in May with assembling his design team, and now we've moved into June. So everybody should be setting the acceleration vision and goals, understanding with the current state of students' learnings, considering doing a support survey, as Brett said that he was doing after he already did the parent groups. Then come July, maybe there's some teams thinking about what are those prerequisite skills that the kids need to enter this 7th grade science course. So we're going to begin scoping that out, thinking about professional learning plan to support the staff. And then in August, finishing up the scope and sequence, finalizing the acceleration plan, and back we go. So time to look at the chat and answer questions, Mary Jane.
Okay, great. So let's start. There's several questions that I'm going to read that are about math, right? Why not just eliminate the compacted math classes? Would love to collaborate with other districts on creating a Math 7A. Let's talk about Math 7-8 as a county. Bob Marcucci said yes to that. So there's a bunch about math. What are your thoughts?
Oh, Brett and I, we both love math. So I think the idea is that we need to honor the heterogeneous class and have the straight 7th grade mathematics class. But it's also really crucial to understand that some students love going that next level. And we also know that parents love it. Make that piece of acceleration a module that's accessible to all of the students. And then the students take it. There could be tutorials, online hours for that to support them. And then those students that successfully pass it and love and have a passion, they can take the algebra in the 8th grade. Brett, my friend, can you add on to that, please?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, you know, to make that big of a switch right now to say we're gonna go ahead and delay any sort of acceleration until high school is a pretty bold step that would consume obviously a lot of time and energy in itself. And so at this time, since most of our districts of the county, if not all of them, have an acceleration option within middle school, it's good to still honor those options for those students that want that acceleration piece. And this is a viable way to do it without providing that homogeneous grouping or tracking that we're trying to avoid.
Mm-hmm. Do either of you have an opinion? What if there was a county-wide class in accelerated math that students could access? Your thoughts?
That would definitely
be great.
Make life easier for all of the teachers out there. Yeah.
Okay,
Really
so
good idea.
Something we could look at. Okay, several about the managing of the Zooming. So the question, if I'm online Zooming, who's watching, who's in front of the rest of the class? So teachers are still in front of their homeroom, but Zooming with another class. Be careful to check with capacity to manage Zooming on campus. We're working to address this issue. So questions about that.
Yeah, and looking at that particular model where teachers had the option to do some pre-recorded or Zoom their live lessons in that moment is something that we're definitely exploring. If we think about how most of our teaching methodologies are throughout the county, we are not a stand and deliver type of group. We provide a explicit direct teaching in a mini lesson type format that's typically around 10 minutes. That's the part that would be Zoom. So if you could imagine a teacher in the, in the front of the classroom with their computer is facing towards them so that those at home have the ability to access it via Zoom, but also those within the classroom are able to access that content at the same time. And then of course, after that mini lesson, go ahead and hit that pause button on Zoom. That's the idea behind it.
Yeah. Hey, and Brett, also, so like if I'm the math teacher and now I'm Zooming into another class and my kids are watching something for social studies, I think within that block, we'd have to say if they're 15-minute chunks and the teacher's watching as well, maybe the social studies class is starting with 15 minutes of reviewing the math homework and kids collaborating and talking while when we're Zooming in with something else. So we might have to schedule those times differently within the hour. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so looking at, especially if we're doing it from class to class, and that's why really looking at grade levels and departments that have been strategic about the pre-recording is very, very helpful. Making those screencasts, making those videos, and branching them out, working, smarter, not harder, to really cover that material within those mini lessons is also highly encouraged too.
So there's a question here that I think might be just a misinformation, but how do you determine which students go into school and which students continue virtually? Isn't it accurate that all students will be doing both of those things?
Yeah, with the current health plan, what Mike Grant said was we're going off of the summer camp model where cohort A, for say the science teacher, 12 come for 3 weeks in a row, and then they then be the ones at home, and the ones from home come. We're just assuming that that summer school model will be okay.
Mm-hmm. Why not just screencast? That way students could work independently at their own pace.
Yeah, those are great options. So that kind of goes with the pre-recording. So having those mini lessons via screencast or another pre-recording type platform could definitely be a way to do this.
Mm-hmm. Can students who blossomed with online learning have the opportunity to stay 100% online?
In our surveys, we are asking parents if they're going to send their kids back. If they're going to send them back with a hybrid model, if they're going to send them back, even if we can have full classroom cohorts, if they send their children back. So we're hoping for some more guidance, I think, from CDE on the flexibility with that type of plan. But we're definitely surveying parents so that we have the information.
So just to be clear, a teacher would have 2 cohorts over the course of a week. Is that accurate?
Well, for the
Yes.
whole week, yeah, because they have the 24 all together, and some of them are at home and some of them are at school, and then they flip flop. So they have 24 students all together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their physical class. Now, a middle school teacher, as we all know, has over 100 students on their roster. And so because their physical classes, that cohort, they're also be delivering instruction either virtually through a recorded lesson, or if we're really lucky, the teacher actually being able to walk over to another cohort and deliver the instruction in person.
Right.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, we're within a minute of the stop time. Thank you all for your questions. Let me just tell you what we do know right now, just to provide sort of a little bit of frame here, that tomorrow morning, the superintendents will be meeting again with public health to hear more about what the thinking is related to the cohorts. The big questions that are in front of all of us, not just in Marin, but statewide, have to do with whether or not we're going to be ultimately getting cohort size, i.e. a number, versus what is practicable is the word that we're hearing that will be used. So that will give us more information about what, how this might play out ultimately, whether it's middle, high school, or elementary school. One of the issues we've talked about is the fact that in an elementary school, if you are going to find yourself with 2 cohorts, that essentially the stable cohort model will by definition involve 2 different cohorts as opposed to all kids together. So that's one of the things we're working on. Also, all the questions around whether or not students will be wearing face coverings, what will the testing protocols be, how is it that we'll be able to ensure that our schools are ready. We're in the process right now of doing site visits to the schools that are raising their hand. In fact, Hall Middle School had a site visit yesterday with a team to develop the structures and strategies of what it will look like as students re-enter the schools. The one premise that does seem to be clear at this point that is so positive is that as we go back to school, that our teachers, whether or not they are teaching students virtually or in person, that they'll be able to do it from their classrooms, which will make a huge difference in terms of their access to the supports necessary, technology, etc. So as we hang up, I just want to say that if there's anybody that's interested, our public health department is really asking that as many of us as possible get tested. They're trying to get more information about people that are asymptomatic, so they have more data to help guide us as we look to the fall. And in fact, tomorrow here at the county office, there will be a testing site. So we'll be getting out some information related to that. So we're going to have a testing site, another pilot to try to help us figure out what that's going to look like when it is likely that as we begin school in the fall, we will also be involved in figuring out our testing strategies for our staff. So with that, Eileen, thank you very much. Brett, thank you very much. This was fabulous. For all of you, this is recorded. All of the handouts will be available. Look forward to seeing you Thursday when we talk about high school. Okay, bye everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks,